Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We have a few more attendees that we're going to give a couple minutes to see if they join. And then as soon as we have a good group of those who did register, we'll go ahead and get started.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Stephanie, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
We'll wait just another minute or two and see if anyone else joins us, just for those of you who have already joined us this morning. All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started just so we have enough time for any questions you may have. Thank you for joining us today for the SBDC and Champaign Public Library webinar, Finding New Customers During COVID-19. My name is Jordan. I'm the Marketing and Events Director for the Champaign County EDC, and we are happy to welcome Stephanie Pitts-Noggle, the Business Librarian from the Champaign Public Library, to discuss this topic with us today. You are welcome to submit any questions you may have for Stephanie in the chat box, and we will cover those as time allows, whether it be in between some of the slides or at the end, going over those as a whole. You will also be receiving a copy of today's presentation, so if there's any links or anything like that she shares that you want to go back and look over, you can do that. And then also a recording of the webinar, so any questions that may be addressed during it, if you want to listen to that again as well. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Stephanie and she will begin our webinar.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. So today we're going to talk about finding new customers during this very unusual time. My name is Noggle. As Jordan said, I'm the Business Librarian at Champaign Public Library, and this is a pretty broad presentation. So if you're a little confused by the time we get to the end, that's okay. If you want to know how can I apply this to myself, definitely I'm going to share a link that'll show you how to book an appointment, a one-on-one Zoom appointment with me. We can also talk on the phone if you're more comfortable that way, but I'm going to share that at the very end. Okay, so today we're going to start with just an overview of what market research is, the process that I generally recommend. We're going to talk about customer segments, what they are and how, personas, what they are and how to make them, how to determine a marketing plan, and we're going to do this information as time allows. The demo might be a little bit short, but I do find that like too much database demoing is a little stale on Zoom anyway. Okay. So what is customer research? So this is any research that involves learning about demographic information, behavioral information, and values-based data about the market. So this is, demographics are age, race, languages spoken at home, number of cars owned, income, rent or homeowner, that kind of thing. Behavioral is going to be like how they shop. Are they coupon cutters? Do they buy online? When they buy online, do they use PayPal? Do they use credit card? Do they buy top, that kind of thing? And values to them. So if you're already in business, you're going to have the next two things. If you're kind of just getting started, you might not, but I just want you to be aware of this kind of research. So quantitative data that you receive directly from customers and potential customers. So this is like your site metrics, the number of engagements with like social media posts, but this is like information that you're getting. That quantitative, it's all numerical data. It's facts and figures. So, you know, we had 300 engagements with this posts. We had 25 clicks. What does that tell us? That kind of thing. And then qualitative information for marketing purposes. This is like feedback that you've maybe in the form of reviews on a site, or maybe you've put out a survey, maybe you've conducted a focus group or done an interview. So those are the types. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about the first bullet point. The other two will come up occasionally. I'm not necessarily assuming you already have that information though. So if you have it, wonderful. That's going to be so much better for you. If not yet, well, just be aware that it's something that you can track and be aware of. That's a separate topic though. So primary versus secondary research, you may have heard of these terms before. Primary research is that qualitative and quantitative research that you do directly with your customers that you already have information about. Secondary research though, and this is again, this bullet point is mostly what we're going to be focusing on today. This is your qualitative and quantitative research that you get from a reliable third party. So we're going to be talking about how you can do this secondary research. All right. Let me keep going. For some reason, this isn't advancing. Okay, there it is. All right, so this is the market research process that I've kind of outlined for folks. It's very flexible and will really fit sort of any need that you might have. We're going to go through these sort of one by one. We're not focused on number 4 today. So we're really mostly focusing on 1 through 3. But this process is by no means like the do market research. It's just like a really flexible outline that I created. So number 1, you're going to determine your research goals. Number 2, you're going to define some key questions and search terms so that you can do like a really good search time searching all over the internet. Then number 3, you're going to create a research plan where you're going to define your research methods and then identify sources for research. And that's where the library is going to come into it. Then you'll actually do that research and then you'll incorporate whatever you find into whatever decision it is that you want to make. So this applies to not just customer research. This is just my general market research process. So research goals. So we know what the goal is to increase the number of customers who are buying from us. So there's sort of 2 main ways to do this. I mean, you can actually do both at the same time, but there are 2 different ways to increase the number of customers. So you're either going to find new customers, so new people who have not bought from you before, new groups of people, or increase your current penetration with existing customer segment or segments. So that means if there are, I don't know, let's say 100,000 people in your customer segments, and you're only getting 30,000 of them buying from you very rarely, how do you make them buy more often? How do you increase the number of these people, and so on? So these are some examples of key questions. Now, remember, these are all examples. You might have different different things that you'll be asking that are specific to your business. So these are some sample questions. By no means are these exhaustive. So when we're thinking about new customers, we want to think about who is already your ideal customer, your best customer, the people who are already buying from you. So what do you already know about your customers? How do they learn about you and your business? How do they pay? Where do they buy? Why do they buy your product? So just thinking about what it is that they like about what you're selling, whether it's a product or service, and the ways in which they go about finding that you exist and making that purchase. So what does that process look like? And if you have that information already, that's wonderful. But if you don't know that stuff yet, it would really be beneficial to sit down and really think about that. So if you look back, let's go back one slide, this number 2, increase penetration with current customer segments. So this first set of bullet points, who is your ideal customer? Maybe in doing this kind of reflection, you realize, hey, you know what? I don't do any marketing on Instagram, and yet I have a lot of women in their 30s and 20s who buy from me. Well, maybe that's a good way. Now that you've thought about their behavior and who they are and what they like, you're thinking, well, I just realized there's a great opportunity to increase the number of people who buy from me because I'm not even advertising on Instagram, and that's a captive audience right there. So you might identify some opportunities just in doing that. But if you're looking to do more of the first bullet point, finding new customer segments to buy, you might be thinking more about who are the other demographic groups that share qualities with the people who are already your kind of best ideal customers. So let's go back to this example of, let's say it's women in their late 20s and 30s who are on Instagram already. What other groups of people are on Instagram? People who are in their teens, in their early 20s. Do you appeal to them? Are there things you can do with your marketing to increase the scope of your appeal, to encourage that group to buy? If maybe they're not, well, I market a product that's more for moms, let's say. So these sort of teenagers, young 20-somethings are not really my target market. Well, what about slightly older moms? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Facebook maybe? Are there other places you can go to advertise? This is just an example. I'm giving the example of social media, but thinking about sort of other groups that share some qualities in common with your ideal customer that they're sort of adjacent, let's call them. And how can you identify those people and move into that sort of adjacent space? Okay, so research plan, first steps. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of our discussion today. So you want to define your customer segments, let's say the ones you already have. So I would do this process sort of with the people you're already trying to or maybe successfully targeting, and then the people who you have not yet reached out to. So you're going to define your customer segments, create personas for each customer segment, and determine the market size for each segment. Now, you don't have to do all of these things, but it's useful to know this information. And if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about with customer segments and personas, that's okay, because we're going to talk about each of these things. So what is a customer segment? So a customer segment is a distinctive group of individuals who share certain demographic, behavioral, and values-based qualities in common. When you're coming up with your customer segments, you don't want them to be too broad or too narrow. The goal here is, if I buy your product, you should be able to easily slot me into an existing customer segment. So if that means, well, I don't really have an idea of where you would fit, you might need to sit down and really think about it. So these are, like I said, I gave an example of moms in their late 20s and 30s. So we're talking about mostly millennials, maybe some Gen Z. So we've made already a pretty clear description of this customer segment. So maybe I want to get even more specific because I know that these are, you know, middle income moms or moms who are more likely to be stay-at-home moms because they got more than one kid and their husbands make all the money. I don't know. There can be any number of examples. You can make them pretty broad or you can make them pretty narrow, like I said, but you just want to not make them too narrow. So I like to start with an example of customer segments would be like Facebook. So when Facebook started, it had a very narrow customer segment. It was students at Harvard. Then it was students at basically all Ivy League institutions. Then it was US universities and colleges. Then it was global colleges and so on and so forth. But now you can think about Facebook's customer segments and it's everybody, but they have very specific algorithms that target different customer segments. So the stuff that they give to people who are, let's say, middle-aged men with conservative viewpoints is going to be different than what they show social activist 20-somethings. Does that make sense? I guess you can't answer right now, but hopefully that makes sense. As I said, we can come back to this with any questions that you may have. So where does customer segments kind of come from? It comes from the lean canvas. You can see here, this is a visual representation of your business in one page. We're not really going to be covering the lean canvas. If you have questions about it, we can talk about it later. But you'll see here on the right, we've got customer segments. And this is where this terms more or less originates and where we can work out how our customer segments and our business intersect. So the other important thing here is this channels. Channels, the other things, don't worry about them. But customer segments and channels are really important for us because channels are the ways in which you reach and communicate with your customer segments. So this is going to be how you market to them, how you deliver your products and services to them, and how you provide customer service to them. So you're going to want to be thinking about your customer segments in that kind of holistic way. Now we're moving on to personas. So after you've defined your customer segments, and I keep saying segments with an S, maybe you only have one, something to think about. But for each customer segment, you would ideally create a persona. So what is a persona? So it's a customer segment that you basically bring to life through a very complete understanding of how that segment looks, thinks, acts, and feels, especially regarding your product or service. It often includes a picture. It doesn't have to be a specific picture of a person. You can look for a stock image. You might include a name and create a little bio. So I kind of started doing that when I was giving the example of stay-at-home mom with 2 kids. She's a millennial. Her husband is the main earner. They're middle income. They might live in the suburbs somewhere. Now, if I wanted to turn that into a persona, I might look for a stock image of somebody who I think fits that description. Then maybe I'll name her Amanda, and I'll give a little bio, which I kind of already did. But it's just to make it feel like a real person. So then when you're thinking about, well, how does this person buy? How do they shop? What do they want to do? What want to see? What message is going to work for them? When I think about those things, I am much better at answering those questions when I'm imagining a real person. What does Amanda want to buy? Where does Amanda shop? And I can kind of put myself in her shoes and imagine her life a little bit because I've created this bio for her. That not every business that's successful does this, but it can just be really, really helpful, especially in a moment where you're trying to increase the number of people who are buying from you. So if you're like, I really don't even know where to start with this, luckily, we have a tool at the Champaign Public Library. It is called Demographics Now. I'll do a little demo of that right at the end. That already has some pre-created personas. So you're seeing here on this slide, I've done a screen cap of the first, it's a PDF. They're usually 4 pages long. They're a little hard to read, but I'll give you a really quick overview. This is just the first page. There is actually a write-up on page 4 that will give you the kind of information that you would infer from sort of reading this. But we're just going to look at this because it's the most helpful to try to learn from this example. Now, if you create your own personal persona for your customer segment, it does not have to follow this rubric or this layout or anything like that. You can come up with your own layout and everything. This is just a sample. So here, what you're seeing is, so Experian, you might be familiar with that company. Then you'll see at the very top, that is the letter I. Then we see I-30, I-31, I-32, and I-33. So Mosaic is a persona tool that has all of the US population divided into 19 groups. So a group is going to be a letter. So that's your I in this example. And then each group has these subtypes. So we're looking at a subtype right now. When you see a letter and a number, you're looking at a type. So a group is this bucket that contains a bunch of smaller types. So we could also be looking at the information for I, which is going to be more general and is going to describe everybody very generally in I-30, I-31, I-32, and I-33. So we get all this more specific information. I will show it to you at the end and hopefully it'll make a little more sense. Okay, so you see we got this name, Potlucks in the Great Outdoors. We have a 1-sentence overview, comfortably established middle-income couples with children living in suburbia. We've got this percentage with a house, a percentage with a little head. This means this is the percentage of households in all of the US. 1.74 households are coded as potlucks in the Great Outdoors, but it's 2.67% of the population. What does that mean? Well, a household means if you have 2, 3 adults, maybe 4 adults, you never know. There's lots of adults living in multi-generational homes. But if you have multiple adults living in a home, that whole house gets coded one way, but each individual might be coded differently. So 1.74% of the households, 2.67% of the individuals. So now we go down, we got a picture, gives us a little, that like I was describing, a picture to describe who these people are. Then we see who we are. Head of household age, 36 to 45 years old. If you look down, you'll see that number 150 or 23.3%. Let's not worry about that right now. Suffice it to say that 23.3% means that is the percentage of people who are coded as potlucks in the Great Outdoors that actually are between the ages of 36 and 45. I know that's not a majority, but they don't do majority, they do plurality. So whatever the largest percentage is, that's what you're gonna see under this who we are thing. So if you, sometimes you'll see like who we are and it'll say head of household age, you have quite an old individual, but then when you look at age of children, the children are really young and you're like, well, what's up with that? But when you actually look at the percentage of people that have children, it's very low. Anyway, if you're confused, don't worry about it. Let's just keep things at a higher level. So type of property, most of them live in single family homes. They don't live in multifamily units. They make between $50,000 and $75,000. Most of them are, well, I guess not most, but many of them are in 2-person households. They own their home, and if you see 89.1%, it's the overwhelming majority of them do own their own homes. And then if they have kids, they are between ages of 7 and 9. We've got this list of key features. This, I would say, is really more important. Country living, outdoor activities, blue-collar jobs, non-environmental, conservative views, motorsports fans. If you've lived in Champaign for more than a few years, you probably know someone who falls into this category. And if you look down at the bottom, we've got these images. They sort of describe the lifestyle. We've got, you know, your sort of classic American dog. domestic travel, gardening, the kind of home they might live in. Remember, I was talking about channels before. We've got these channel preferences. So you'll see TV. Next to that is a letter. That means mail. Then we've got radio. That thumbs up is social media. That @ sign is email. And that ... is text. So those numbers underneath, those are what's known as an index. So 100 is the national average across all people. So if it said 100 somewhere, that would mean it's the same about average for anyone in the country. So it's not a lot, it's not a little, it's just average. So we see here TV at 15. That is a tiny, out of 100, it's a tiny amount. Or radio is at 10. So they're 1/10 as likely to get information about businesses and industries through the radio as they are as the general population. So if I want to market my business to this group of people, I probably don't want to be putting information on the radio. If you look at all of the channel preferences, I probably want to be reaching them through social media because they are more likely, they're almost 1.5 times as likely to be reached through social media. Even though if you look at technology adoption, they're only apprentices. So that probably means they're looking at this stuff on their phone. They probably only have one social media platform that they use. And if I wanted to do that research, I could do that separately. So to make this a little more personal, I've taken a mosaic chart that is just for Champaign County. So you can see up in the left-hand corner, it says geography, Champaign County, date, I ran this morning. And down here, remember I said groups are the 19 overarching buckets that everybody in society is included in. You'll see we have some groups that are really well represented, and then we have some that are not so well represented. And I couldn't include the whole page. It was just too much information. So I've just shown the top 4. So the biggest groups are singles and starters, which I think from the title, you can probably guess what that means. And this is a college town, so that's no surprise. That's 29.1% of the population. Then we've got Group J, autumn years. You might be able to get some information from that. You'll notice that those are blue. If you actually looked at them on the site that I got this information from, you'd be able to click on that and it would take you right back to this. So you'd get more information about what those mean. So if you're like, I don't know what those are and I don't understand, you'd be able to click on them and it would give additional information. We got Group C, booming with confidence, and then finally Group E, thriving boomers. You can see those are much smaller groups. So again, these are groups. If I go down here, now I've done another report. It's the household-based summary index report, which breaks down each of the groups, which you can see, into types. So I only had room in the slide to do the top 3. So you can see Group O, singles and starters, has 6 types underneath of it. Then Group J has only 3 and Group C has 4. Now you can see while Group O, go back one, was 29% here, when you actually get down into the nitty gritty, certain groups are going to be like colleges and cafes is the best represented in that group, followed by influenced by influencers, a great and tragic name. You will notice that the percentage is a little bit different here. It's just because they're using slightly different information to get to these numbers for this particular report. I know that's confusing. I apologize for the confusion. I don't know why they do it like that, but they do. Suffice it to say, 26% is still a lot. So this is the more detailed report that you would run. So we got O, J, and C. This is just to give you an example. So we are talking a little bit about behavior, like this stuff. Let's go back here. This stuff gives you a little sense of people's behavior. We've got some key features, which tell us a little bit about their behavior. These pictures tell us a little bit about their behavior, the channel preferences, technology adoption. We get a little sense of who these people are. Looking at the write-up that accompanies this, you get some additional information. But that might not be enough for you based on what it is that you're selling, whether it's a product or service, and how you're selling it. So you may have to do some research on behavior. We have a lot of great tools. This is an example of a Statista report where, let's say, so remember before, let's go back here one more time. We saw that this group between the ages of 36 and 45, so they're mostly Gen X, their channel preference was social media, but that doesn't really give us any information about which part of social, like which social media product they use. Whereas here, so let's see, it does sort of jump between two different categories, because we got 30 to 44 here and 45 to 54. You'll notice in both categories though, 89 and 88% Facebook. So if I had to make one choice for how to reach that group through social media, my best bet is to go with Facebook. It's clear from this. There are other things that you can research on Statista. This is just an example. So remember I talked about market size. I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but the reason I bring it up is if we go back here, let's say you were like, okay, I am going to pick, you know, what my product really doesn't appeal to younger folks. It appeals to more of these autumn years, booming with confidence and thriving boomers groups. So that still makes up, you know, quite a chunky percentage. That's, in fact, if I add it all together, that's more than singles and starters. Now I'm getting into the weeds here. I'm going to look at J. I got suburban sophisticates. Then I got sophisticated city dweller. Well, it's only 4.5 and 3.6%. I don't know. Seems a little low. But I would take, to figure out if it's worth it to like appeal to those people, I might do something like this. Take the number of people matching those personas, multiply it by the price of my product, multiply it by the number of times a year that they will buy that product, and estimate. So let's say I'm selling coffee. Let's say I'm selling coffee beans, something you can still sell while stores are closed. I'm going to multiply the number of people that are matching my personas, which I can do through demographics now, which I'll show you, the price of the product, which you've already set, and how often do you think they really go through coffee. And that'll tell you your market size to figure out if it's maybe not worth it to move into a new area. You can also look at the average spend per person and multiply it by the number of people in your market if you have something that just broadly appeals to everybody. Let's not worry about this too much right now. I just wanted to cover it so that when we, later, if you decide to come back to this, you might focus on this part. Okay, so now we're talking about we're on number 3, which was your research methods and determining your process. So I got 3 main resources to tell you about today, which is going to be Demographics Now, where we're talking about Mosaic. There's something called Mergent Intellect, and then there's Statista, which you've already seen. The strengths and weaknesses, you can come back and take a look at these on your own. So here are some sample processes, and I've given 2 examples. This business scope, a local business scope versus a more national business scope. So what am I talking about? So let's say you own a coffee shop, and while your shop is closed, you want to be selling, you either want to be delivering coffee to people at their home, or maybe you want to be selling beans, or you want to be selling coffee brewing products. Either way, it's probably easier to have a local scope if you are a coffee shop. That's not to say that you can't sell to people all over the world, because e-commerce allows you to do whatever. But at this moment, this local scope is sort of like your restaurants, clothing, brick and mortar clothing stores, maybe if you just don't have an e-commerce site, restaurants, coffee shops, that kind of stuff. So the goal of like a local business would be to increase the number of segments in the community that buy from you. So then your key questions end up focusing more on, well, who lives in Champaign County? And as we saw a few slides ago, you have on the one hand a lot of people who are in the baby boomer age group, and then you have a lot of people in this college kid age group. How can I appeal and sell to both? So that's your challenge. The other potential question would be, can I expand my reach into other neighboring counties? So I'm increasing the number of people that I'm selling to. So that's an example of like a local business, what your goal might be and some of the key questions you might ask. Now, if you have, let's say, a completely online business, your goal could be to increase the number of segments you appeal to, but it's probably easier to increase the number of customers in existing segments. So you want just more people to buy from you. So how can I increase the number of customers who buy from me? And then maybe you might ask what other customers are similar. So for a local business, your research methods, you would maybe start with Mosaic, looking at who lives in Champaign County. Then you can use a map feature on Demographics Now, which I will demonstrate in a moment, to run reports showing consumer expenditure or retail demand or retail supply. So see where there's opportunity in the market. And then you might use Mergent Intellect to research consumer data. If you have a national business, you might want to start first with doing some first research. So this is an industry report. This will tell you a little bit more about how people buy, who they're buying from. It would tell you the national trends and behaviors. Then you might do a general search in Statista for your either your industry, or if you know you have a particular customer segment, you might research them. There's a typo in Demographics Now, Demp Graphics Now, that should read Demographics Now. I might go back to Mosaic if needed, just to shore up my understanding of my my customer segment. So if you're a little confused, that's okay. We're going to come back to that. I'm going to take a moment and show you what this would actually look like. So first we're going to do a business with a local scope. Then we're going to do a business with more of a national or international scope. I am going to pause right now to just see if there are any questions that would be best for me to answer before moving to the next thing.
And just as a reminder, you can enter your questions in the chat box and we'll make sure that Stephanie gets them.
Okay, so it's going to take me just a minute to open, then to share my screen one more time. Okay. So now you should be looking at my Champaign Public Library screen. Is that what you see, Jordan?
Correct. Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you'll see I'm at champaign.org/business. If you scroll down here, you'll see business tools. This is a little bit small, but they are right there. So we talked about Demographics Now. Click on that. We talked about Statista, and we talked about Mergent. So let's pretend I'm going to do my local business first, and I am a coffee shop, since I already gave that example. So my first thing that I wanted to figure out was who's already living in the area and what are people buying. Okay, so I'm going to go to Demographics Now. It's going to make me put in my Champaign Public Library card number and PIN, but I already did that earlier today, so you didn't see that part. If you don't yet have a library card, you can sign up for an e-card that will allow you to use this stuff right away. If you live in Urbana or Savoy or something like that, please shoot me an email. My email will be coming up shortly, and we can talk about other ways that you can get this information. So I cannot go into the weeds on demographics now at the moment because you need to know it is not very user-friendly. It is very, very steep learning curve. And I can do a one-on-one with you to do a better demo of this, but I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because we only have 20 minutes left and a little bit more to cover. So if you're not following this, don't worry. Please talk to me and we can set up a time later. I do also have a typed up kind of walkthrough that's very general that I can send you. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my geo filter and I'm going to start typing in Champaign. The first, you'll see I got Ohio. Champaign Ill Place is going to be the city. I'm going to do the county though because it's easy. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this demographics, and just to make things complicated, you'll see under report type, the first thing that comes up is comparison. I'm going to go to summary. I'm not comparing anything. I'm just looking at one. So summary is what I want. Now there's a ton of different reports, but I'm going to go down to Mosaic. And the first thing that I showed you was this Mosaic detail chart. So if I selected it, I clicked run report, you'll see I've got that information up here with a very broad overview of the demographics. There's that chart that you saw before. And if you down here, it's a breakdown percentage wise. So you'll see like group H and group M, it's 0% here. There's nobody in those groups in Champaign. And if you're like, well, why is that? It's usually because those groups can only exist in like major metros or really rural areas. So like we're not classified as that. So it's not going to appear there. Or maybe it'll just be in the Pacific Northwest or just in the South or just in the East Coast or something like that. So remember before I said you could click on these things. So let's go with our singles and starters. I don't know why that's so small. Let me zoom in. So here we've got, yeah, singles and starters, young singles starting out in some starter families, living a city lifestyle. You see the overall percentages here. Our picture, channel preference. So this TV thing is also going to include streaming, very obviously. They're not on social media as much as they are. Text message is really good. Radio is going to include streaming as well, so like your Pandora, things like that. Remember I talked before about how there are other pages. This page, don't really worry about it. You can look at it yourself. This page explains this page. I mostly focus on page 1, and then I go straight to page 4. Page 4 is great because it gives you a write-up that describes who these people are, where they shop, what they do in their spare time. It gives you a lot of really great information. But remember, this information is not specific to Champaign. It is completely general to the US population. So if you're like, this doesn't sound true of the people here, go with your gut on that one. And then of course you got this great how to market section. So that's pretty wonderful. But this just shows us our groups. I might want to look instead at this Mosaic. HH stands for Household Cluster Summary Index Report. I'm going to click Run Report. And there we go. I've got my index report right there. So going down to type O, it breaks down everything. So this is really robust. You can see we've got this digitally savvy, colleges and cafes, influenced by influencers. If I'm like, well, I really want to know more about that, I click on it, and it's going to give me this information again. And again, if I go to page 4, I've got a little bit of a shorter write-up than I did for the group, but I got this great write-up as well. So that's cool, but how much does it really tell me? What's really useful is to go to this map feature, and there we are, Champaign County. It's all outlined, our beautiful rectangle. And if I really wanted to know where these groups and types are located, where do they live, I can go to this variable. I'm going to pick mosaic household, residential, adult population, singles and starters, influenced by influencers. So you'll see it's thinking. And there you go. Where you see the really dark red is going to be where these people are represented highly. So let's say we go with the suggestion of, okay, well, maybe we can stick with the people we're already doing well with, but how do we expand our reach? Well, you'll notice there's a little pocket in Decatur. We've got a little pocket in Bloomington. We go down here, we got Terre Haute over here. So there are examples of small pockets elsewhere, but let's go ahead and actually zoom in. Because the closer we get, the more granular the information is going to be. So ignore that red right now, it's just loading. It's got a lot of information to sort through. Okay, so now it's all loaded. You can see where we have these groups. So around Parkland, that's no surprise. Living around the university, that's no surprise. In parts of Urbana. So this should come as kind of no surprise to a lot of people. Maybe over here by the country club might be a little bit of a surprise, but pretty interesting stuff. So this is one way to figure out. Now, remember, we had, well, we might want to go back and look again at, let me see, some of the other mosaic groups. So just now we were looking at a type. Let's say I wanted to stick with a group. So if I go back here to my residential mosaic, I can go to groups. I'm going to go back to adult population. Now remember, the second one was autumn years. So where do they live? So a little bit more distributed. Not that we don't see the same like intense heat map that we saw before. So that's pretty interesting. But why am I doing this? I'm doing this because we can overlay, well, first of all, because if you ever do any marketing on Facebook, you will know that in the ad center, you can actually be unbelievably location specific with how you target your advertising, even to the point of having geographical boundaries at this kind of level. So you can have really, really specific information there. I can also go back here. And remember I said there are other reports I could run. So I'm going to go to consumer expenditure is another great one. I'm going to go for current year estimates. I'm going to go for average expenditure. I'm going to go to food and beverages. Wait, no, that's going to take me. Like I said, it is the learning curve. There is a coffee in here. I know it, but where did it go? Well, let's just go with, I mean, you can always do alcoholic beverages. Let's just do that for, I mean, you can't always do it, but you get my point. So there is a coffee one in there. I would sit around and search for it forever if it were up to me. But maybe I want to know, I'm going to do away from home because this is what you can't really do right now. So let's see, let's say I'm a brewery and I'm trying to appeal to people who normally were drinking outside of the home, but now they have to drink at home. So let's go with this. Sorry, let me actually zoom out. Give it a moment. Okay, so we saw that this changed a little bit. We have a couple intensely red areas, but the reason I'm showing you this is to see the overlap between what we just saw and this. And if you were like, that was too fast for me, I really didn't catch that. That's okay, that's typical. What I could do is use my geometry tool. This is an example. You can do up to like 8 of these. I'm gonna say, call it beer. And I'm going to go to update geography. Now you'll see, okay, that wasn't very well drawn, but now you'll see up in my geo filter, I'm only looking at beer. So if I want to know more about who lives here, and you can make these as large or as small as you want, you can do up to 8 geographies at a time. But I can also go back to this demographic report thing, and you'll see as long as the geo filter says whatever custom geography you just created was, you're just searching in that one area. Now I know that in this one area we've got some family funtastic, we've got ambitious singles, we've got settled and sensible under autumn years, we've got hardworking values, bohemian groove, but most of them are this rooted flower power, that's 34%. And so you can start to see that we get this really specific understanding of who lives in which neighborhoods. So we can be really, really targeted. We can also run a report, consumer expenditure on food, beverage. Just give that a second. And you can see here, we've got all that beer, blah, 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 blah. We got food. There we go. So that also gives us some information. Another thing, now that you have some sense of who buys what and everything, if we go to our next thing, we can move on to Mergent, which I'm going to show you super quick. I'm going to go down here to consumer data. I'm going to go to advanced search. All right, location, county, Illinois. Go to Champaign County, add to criteria. Lifestyle. So we found a little bit of information out about our, let's go back here. Okay, so let's go with the singles and starters group here. Rental housing, single adults, politically disengaged, engaged via radio, foodies, digitally savvy. So we know a little bit of information there. Let's go back here. Okay, so we know their age. So we're going to go do that in a second. So they are high-tech enthusiasts. They are also travel enthusiasts. We know they're foodies, but they're probably maybe not cooking and wine. So let's just stick with that for a moment. Consumer detail, they're renters. Now I will say renter, this information, there's less information for renters than there are for homeowners. Let's go, their income is super low, but they're single. Let's go with inferred single. And age range, let's just do those age ranges. This might be too specific, but let's see what we get. We only came up with 25 records. That's fine. Let me take off this lifestyle stuff. All right. So now you see we found about 2,000 records. It is much easier to find people who are in that older age group because they are homeowners and there's more information, but we still found 2,000 results in Champaign based on what is actually fairly specific info. I know it may not seem specific, but we have names, we have addresses. There's only one phone number. That's no surprise. This age group doesn't really have a lot of home phones. But this gives us maybe just like a little bit of information. If you ever want to do a mailing campaign or something, you can also take this information and figure out where these places are on a map and see if it corresponds. But so that's one way to do that. I will also just show you how cool Statista is really, really quick. So Statista has a really, really intuitive search, very, very straightforward. So if I was maybe researching like an online business, I might just want to look at e-commerce information. So this is giving us worldwide information. So let's actually go with this idea of a coffee shop on a sort of national scale. Let's say I'm selling coffee beans. Okay, so if I go to coffee here, I've got coffee market in the US. That's great. Overview, worldwide production. No, I don't really care about that. Consumer behavior though. Method of preparation among past day coffee drinkers. Past day means in the previous day. So how did they prepare their coffee the previous day? Drip coffee maker usage. Consumption, coffee consumption by age group, that might give me a lot of information. If I want to download this, I can download it as a PowerPoint or a PDF. It's going to look like, if I download it, I have to change what I'm sharing with you. So I'm not going to do that at the moment because we only have a few minutes left. But these will look like the slide I showed you before. So let me go back and share this one more time. Sorry. So that is what it looked like. That's what a Statista chart looks like when you download it. And going down to our last sort of thing, a marketing plan. So you're going to take what you already know and what you've researched, and you're going to put it all together. And for each customer segment, you want to answer sort of your typical who, what, when, where, why, how. So the why is obvious. You want to make more money. Who are your customers? Where will you reach them? What message will resonate with them? How? You doing a video, a photo, animation, words? Is it a flyer? Is it whatever? So you really want to make sure that you have a solid understanding of your customers so that you can answer these questions so that you have the best possible marketing plan that you can have. So that's everything. If you're a little confused, that's totally fine because demonstrating these databases can take a really, really long time and everybody is different. So if you are someone who wants to sell all over the world, that's going to be a very different thing than if you have a very niche market and it's all local. If you want to book an appointment with me, you can go to my Calendly and put in S-Pitts-Noggle. You can see all of my availability and book an appointment. You can also email me here, have an Instagram too. So now, are there any questions?
We currently don't have any questions that have been submitted, but we'll give you guys a minute here and see if there's any that come in. And just as a reminder, once again, I will send out the presentation and a recording of today's session that you can reference back to if need be. In that email, I will also include the contact information for Stephanie as well. All right, I'm not seeing any questions being submitted. If you guys think of anything after the fact, you're welcome to follow up with our office and we can connect you to Stephanie or directly to Stephanie herself.
Yeah, and I'm happy to work with any of you on kind of going through this process for yourselves. I know that it is a little bit circuitous and winding, and the tools are really, really robust, sort of complicated, but you can get into all sorts of stuff like this if you need to.
All right, well, if we don't have any questions, we appreciate you guys joining us today. And like I said, if you have any follow-up information, you're welcome to contact us or Stephanie, and we'll pass that along if need be. But if not, thank you for joining us once again and have a great day.
Thank you.